Hello. My name is Dr. Michio Kaku. I'm a physicist, and my day job is to work on concepts that you're familiar with if you read Marvel comics. Einstein-Rosen bridges, parallel universes, multiverses. That's what I do for a living. However, we're not going to talk about that today. Today, we're going to talk about my other life as a futurist. We're going to talk about the future of medicine, the future of the aging process. Recently, there have been a number of astounding discoveries made by scientists and people here concerning the aging process. Is it possible to slow it down? Is it possible that we can build up our health to the point where we can begin to think about reversing the aging process? Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the 92nd Street Y for making this event possible. And of course, National Geographic for spearheading the whole production. And it's going to air on Disney+. So I'd like to thank them for making this event possible. And as I mentioned, we're going to talk about the aging process, immortality, health, mortality. But first, let me tell you a little story from Greek mythology. Eons ago, there was a beautiful young goddess named Aurora, goddess of the dawn. She was immortal. She lived forever. But she had the misfortune of falling in love with a mortal, Tithonus. Well, Aurora realized that her lover would eventually die. So she went to Zeus, the god of gods, to plead with him to give him the gift of immortality to the boyfriend. Well, Zeus took pity on Aurora, so he gave the gift of immortality to Tithonus. But Aurora made a mistake. She made a huge mistake. When she asked for eternal life, she forgot to ask for eternal youth. As a consequence, every year, Tithonus would age, get older, get decrepit, weaker, but he could never die. Well, today, on this panel, we're going to talk about discoveries which may allow us to overturn this curse. We may be able to have both a longer life and a richer, fuller, healthier life. In fact, the key to living longer may, in fact, be to have a healthier life. And so we'll talk about that with today's program, where we're going to talk to Chris Hemsworth, star of the Thor series. And the first question for you is, Chris, you're from Australia, and many people here are familiar with your work in the Marvel movies. And the question is, look, you could have chosen any documentary to work on. You're a hot property in Hollywood now. So why did you decide to pick this particular documentary to work on? Why this?
It was the first time working in the documentary space. I had Darren Aronofsky call me up and pitch me this idea. He said, look, you want to know how to live longer, better, and healthier? And I said, absolutely. So laid out the pillars of health and wellness and a lot of the science around longevity, and basically the experience was going to be me going on a series of adventures and different challenges that were going to test some of that science. And some of them physically grueling, some of them mentally challenging, but all of them had a very profound effect on me in more ways than one.
So you think you could be sort of like a role model? Because millions will see programs like this. Mm-hmm. So you could be like a role model. People will say, well, he can do it. I can do it too. Absolutely. I don't have a hammer like his, but I can try.
It was. Look, if I could be a conduit of any form to help an audience understand and tap into their full potential, then fantastic. And I think that was, all of us had a duty to do that, and in an entertaining, fun way. But even people have seen the couple of episodes that we've shown the last few days. The response has been incredible, and to hear people say how it has touched them in different ways and make them think about their life in different ways and different ways to approach health and wellness. That's a pretty special thing to be a part of.
Okay, Darren Aronofsky, you produced many hits, major films like Mother, starring Jennifer Lawrence and Michelle Pfeiffer, Noah, starring Russell Crowe, Black Swan, starring Natalie Portman. Needless to say, many of your films have won Academy Awards. So the question for you is, why do you decide to tackle a question which is so profound, yet so intimate as death, life, and mortality? Why did you choose this topic?
I started thinking about immortality and longevity back in, I guess it was around 2000. I started working on a film called The Fountain, which is about a man who wanted to live forever. And a lot of the ideas in that were in the realm of science fiction. But over the last 15, 20 years, as you were talking about, science has started to really investigate some of these avenues. I think as the boomers and we Gen Xers are getting older, there's suddenly a lot of interest about end of life and how not to deal with it in many ways. So as it got popular, I thought it might be time to revisit those themes and actually examine longevity science in the state of where it is. And so we just started to put together this incredible team of experts and needed to find a host to lead us through it.
So you've had access to some of the leading minds and leading researchers on the topic. So after all of this, are you optimistic? Is there a glimmer of hope? Can we see the light at the end of the tunnel? Or is it an illusion?
Well, BJ can talk more about this in a second, but the kind of punchline of The Fountain was always that death is part of life. And so what episode did they show tonight? Did you guys watch Acceptance tonight? Oh, great. So you got to the end. So really, at the beginning of this show, I always knew I wanted the final episode to be about acceptance. And then through the insights of this panel, we started to realize that actually having acceptance is one of the healthiest things that you can do. So that's really the answer, is welcoming death as part of life is a big part of living healthy lives.
Okay, now next, Dr. B.J. Miller. You're a palliative care professor at the University of California in San Francisco. And when you were 19 years of age at Princeton, something happened which shattered your life. There was an electrocution by a train line, and you happened to have lost 3 of your limbs as a consequence. And of course, at that point, you had to confront a question that most of us don't have to confront, and that is life and death. So the question is, what insights, what lessons do you give your patients who come to you because they too are facing life and death? What lessons do you give them?
Well, I think more than give them, it's more that we kind of reflect our way to some truth. You know, I kind of pull things out, I ask them questions, reflect with them, ask them if it's true what they're saying, and just push them a little bit. Because the subject's always in the room, especially when you're dealing with illness, especially if you have a diagnosis. It's in the room explicitly or not. So oftentimes it's sort of a ballet getting to the question. I certainly don't go right there. You don't ask about death right out of the chutes unless they ask or bring it up. So it's more a process of getting to know each other and talking about their life, things that they love, things that they might be afraid to leave. And that way we kind of tiptoe into the subject. And that way also you can build trust. Because this is, as you said, a very intimate subject. It's a vulnerable making subject. So you have to treat it gingerly and carefully. And each of us can get there in different ways at different times. I may be able to talk about it now, but if I'm sick, I may need to keep it at bay for a while. There's a time for fighting. So there's no formula for this. But eventually, just by continually looking in the mirror, you will see truths. And one of those big truths is that we're mortal. You can't ignore it for too long, or you suppose you can, but then to trouble. And really, my job in palliative care is not to help people live longer or shorter. I mean, sometimes actually it is. Sometimes people choose death, and my job may be able to help them to die. But really, I'm just more there to help make sure that they don't suffer more than they need to. and that they can realize joy. And in that way, if you find a full context of life to work within, it will include death invariably. And this is sort of a part of a larger conversation about life, as Darren said. So I kind of took a different tack with your question, but that's sort of how I kind of go about, that's how the field of palliative care gets to the subject with people. Yeah.
Well, let's say hypothetically we had a time machine, and you could go back and meet yourself when you were 19, and you could talk to yourself in the hospital bed. What advice would you give yourself, knowing the enormous disruption that this would have in your life, but that there's a light at the end of the tunnel? What advice would you give yourself?
I'm tempted to make a joke, but I can't think of one. Yeah. But I think I would do something like, I think I would pretty much, I don't know what I would say. It might be a touch. It might put my hand on my own chest and just sit there and hold the silence and let truth seep in. I don't know that there's much of a word for some of this stuff. I don't know I would have even heard it back then. But touch, accompaniment, being with someone, staring into the abyss with someone, that's very healing. That's very helpful. Maybe I would have done something like that. But if you're going to push me to say a word, I probably would have said something like, I probably would have winked at myself and said, you're going to laugh at this someday. You're going to actually love this moment someday. You're going to learn so much from this moment someday. It's going to give you so much in common with everyone who's ever lived, who suffered. So something like that.
Okay, our next panelist, Alua Arthur. You're a spiritual teacher, but you started off as a lawyer. As a lawyer until you met a young woman who was dying and facing death. And this experience apparently changed your life. And as a consequence, now you've dedicated your life to the idea that accepting death can inspire us to live fuller lives. So you've given an understanding to the people around the world now, a new way of confronting and understanding death. And so here's the question for you. How do you impart these hard-earned lessons that you've accumulated over so many years? How do you impart this message to the people that follow your work?
That's a great big question. I think I'd probably say, much like BJ was alluding to, that a big portion of my work as a death doula is not to help anybody get anywhere. It's not necessarily my job to help somebody see that they're going to die. It's an individual work that everybody must do at some point, but it's not my job to get them there. I mean, it's hard enough to get somebody to break up with somebody that they shouldn't be with, let alone to be like, you're going to die, you know what I mean? My job is just to be with them where they are. My job is largely to be present, to offer the gift of bearing witness to pain and to suffering, to give words to what they're experiencing, to reflect back what they're experiencing, rather than to push somebody in a particular direction or to get anybody comfortable with the fact that they're death. Many stay uncomfortable, and that's just fine. That's just fine. Many stay fearful, and that's also just fine. There's no imperative that says that we must get over our fear of death, or we must not have any, or we must just be ready. Nothing says that. What the call is, what the biggest request I think is, that we sink really deep into our actual humanity and we be with where we are right now for whatever it is. Sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's grace, sometimes it's love, sometimes it's joy, and sometimes it's also just really difficult, and that's okay too.
Now, you've influenced the life of other people. So hearing their stories now, hearing their experiences, has it changed you? Has it begun to open your eyes to different new insights about the whole question of life and death and meaning?
I think it's impossible to spend a lot of time around dying and not be changed by it. I hope I never am. I mean, I hope that I constantly am standing in awe at the greatest mystery that any of us will ever experience in our lives, which is that we die and why we die and what happens, if anything, when we die. So I hope that I consistently stay humble to that question and that idea. I don't remember actually where your question began because I already went left. Yeah, good enough?
Good enough.
Great.
Okay. Next, we have Ross Edgley, who is a personal trainer to Chris Hemsworth. And this is rather...
Right.
Wrong introduction.
Wrong. He's not.
And my jaw hit the floor when I read the next statement. You are the first person, the first human, to ever swim completely around the UK without setting foot on land. Try it sometime. Swimming completely around the UK without setting foot on land over a period of 5 months, traveling 1,780 miles swimming. How do you do that? I mean, how does the human body endure such hardship? I mean, I can't even swim 1 mile, let alone 1,780 miles over a period of 5 months. How do you do that?
Oh no, you're kind. It was just an eating competition with I was just floating basically. The tide did most of the work. But it was. I think what was so amazing about that particular swim is with so much time to think. So you're swimming 12 hours a day for 157 days. You get to just kind of experience nature at its rawest. And I think when you look at the shock episode, for instance. What we tried there, and I go off on a little bit of a tangent, but my background in sports science, very much inspired by the work of Hans Selye, so Hungarian physician, 1936, basically took a lab full of rats and gave them a lethal dose of poison. They keel over and died. And then he found that by giving them a little bit of poison, a little bit more, they built up an intolerance to it. So he found that stress and stimuli basically caused these indestructible lab rats. I think what was amazing is being brought on board with the whole Limitless team when chatting with Darren. It was this idea of what can we do to Chris, like just in terms of stress and stimuli, to make him this indestructible lab rat. And I think it was amazing just because Darren just kind of gave us just this blank page, which was dangerous with me, as you can imagine. And I was just like, oh, ice swimming, rope climbs, and then also as well on top of that, they say that training is the realization of one's genetic potential. So you sit on this dormant genetic potential until you actually do something in terms of strength and conditioning to realize it. And I think with Chris, obviously, you know, he's a specimen. He won the genetic lottery in so many ways. So it was amazing just to sort of be given this blank sheet of paper and go, right, stress and stimuli, what can we do? And like I said, that starts in Norway with the shock episode where we just got naked and went swimming across an Arctic fjord. And then it ended up with a rope climb as well. So a 100-foot rope climb dangling 1,000 foot from the Blue Mountains. And I hope that Chris has become that indestructible lab rat as a result, I think.
Ross has done many insane athletic feats. He did a triathlon carrying a 50-kilogram log with him. So he swam with it, he rode a bike, he ran with it. He climbed a rope up and down continuously until he'd climbed the height of Mount Everest. What else did he do, Ross? He recently did the longest, he broke the world record, the longest continuous swim, 54 hours without getting out of the water, without stopping anything. So he's not my trainer. I wish he was. I was obsessed with Ross. I'd followed him on social media and said we need to have him in the show. And he's as talented here as he is physically. He's an absolute specimen in every way, shape, and form. And he was my guiding light through many of these insane adventures I was sent on.
Okay, Ross, quick question. Do you, in your heart of hearts, think that people are born this way, or they have to earn the rights to bulk up and get muscles, or is it just, genes that you're just born that way? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, good question. I think, obviously, we know that people have a genetic predisposition for strength training, endurance. Everyone will have something. But again, going back to Chris, again, with ice swimming, you might train for a year for that. You put on body fat. Body fat's insulating. You don't want muscle mass as well. Not really, because obviously that's negatively buoyant. So Chris just had the worst body for ice swimming, with respect. So what was so interesting is he almost managed to biohack those physical defects, if you want to call them that, and was just able, just through sheer resilience, able to actually get through it. And on 5 days training, like I said, was able to do that. And then the same on the rope climb as well, just to put it into perspective. So you were, I think, 110 kilos. You were Thor size for that. I have friends who are Olympic gymnasts who are 60 kilos. So it was almost gluing two of those together, dangling them from the Blue Mountains and then making them climb up. So it was amazing how, in so many ways, it didn't make sense what Chris did. But I'm so glad he did it, because he challenged certainly what I thought was possible, and hopefully what everybody else thinks is possible when you watch it.
Okay. Now, I'd like to just throw it open, okay? Let me ask you a question to the entire panel. Feel free to jump in at any time, okay? And the question is, after everything is said and done, after all the filming is done, the camera crews put their cameras away, what did you learn? Did it change the way you eat? Did it change your behavior, your attitude? Did it change you in any way, even the smallest way? Your eating habits, your exercising habits, your outlook on life, the meaning of death? Did it change you in any way? Anybody?
I go. I was just thinking about the title, because I think when I first pitched it, it was always Limitless. I was a little bit upset about that movie, but I was like, oh, this will be bigger than that. But I just thought it was the right title, and it's funny because the episode you watched tonight is the answer to Limitless, is that it's not limitless, that there is a limit. And just hearing Ross talk about the limitless of Chris's resilience, which I definitely never found the limit of it, although we tried. We never got to, he never gave up on anything. He got through everything, every bar we raised, he went for it. But the final episode is about it. So I don't know what that means, but that's what I just learned this minute. And I haven't figured out what that means, but I'm thinking about it.
I'll just say I have nothing to say because I haven't watched other episodes. So that's my turn.
Each episode offers up something very different, and I took away the whole lot of different health techniques and tips and hacks. There was stress management, sleep health, nutrition, strength, so on. But the sort of overarching theme, as Darren's touching on, about which it all led to, was the acceptance episode. And it's just about a wonderful appreciation and joy for life, and a sense of gratitude. And speaking with people at the end of their life, and situations where they have come so close to death, just makes you realize that it is finite, and we do like to think that we're somehow going to cheat death in some way, and we'll figure it out. And to confront it and to be put through this scenario, I'd never have any experience like that in my life unless I was right there doing it for real. So I certainly, as you see in the episode, I came away from it wanting to grab my family and hold them close, and my friends, and smile and enjoy life and not take things too serious. And that throughout everyone we worked with through the show, there was a great sense of humour. And I think that's also the key too. If you're not laughing and having a good time, then what's the point? And so I take all of that with me.
Okay. And what about your personal habits? Do people eat less cholesterol products? Do people try to walk 10,000 steps per day? I mean, did it change you in any way, your outlook, saying that if I do this, I'll live a little bit longer, I'll be healthier, stronger? Did it change you in any way, your habits, your ingrained habits? Quit smoking, quit eating so much animal fat, whatever. Did it change you in any way?
Quit swimming around Great Britain.
These guys haven't seen it yet, so it's hard for them. They haven't taken the lessons from it. I was one of the big mentors in the project, who's not in this episode, but is in 3 of the other episodes, is Dr. Peter Attia, and I've been friends with him for a long time and listening to his wisdom for a while. So it was interesting to see a lot of this a lot of the things he's been thinking about, and then bringing in the specialists of the specialists to sort of question it. And like, it was very interesting that the ice plunge, that there's no science for it right now. Yet for everyone up here, I don't know if you guys do ice baths, but for the three of us, we all know that there's definitely benefits, but there isn't any actual evidence yet. But we did learn that sauna, absolutely, there's real science over, what do they call it when it's over a long period of time? That type of experiment? Longitudinal, whatever it is. But that they have all these different tests where they take populations that don't do sauna, and then they do sauna, and they see all these incredible results. So it was interesting, and it's not really in this episode, but there's a lot of science in the first 5 episodes. It's actually interesting. It's impossible to see everybody, but it's like this incredible family entertainment, I believe, especially the first 5 episodes, which is really science-based, and I really recommend go home and watch it with your kids, because all the kids that like that guy, and everyone likes that guy, so that's good. But there's also all this adventure and science in it. But I'm curious, by like a show of hands, how many people who have kids would feel weird about this last episode showing it to them? A few, right. Right. And just to prove that people are actually listening to the question, how many people would not care about showing this to their children? Right. That's interesting. Yeah. No, I was watching it last night, thinking about it's heavy, and I'm curious to ask what you guys think. Is there an age that kids shouldn't be exposed to? Like, my parents never took me to a funeral through my whole childhood. I was not exposed to death in any way in my culture, which I always thought was a mistake. And probably why I'm now making films and fucking TV shows about it. But I'm curious what you guys think as the experts, how you think about that and talk to parents and stuff like that.
You know, kids already have a solid idea about death. Around the age of 4, they start wondering and talking a lot about it, largely because of what's happening in the brain. They start experiencing object impermanence and recognizing that sometimes things go away and don't come back. And if any of y'all have spent time with a 4-year-old, their questions are really rich and very confronting. And they ask a lot of difficult questions about death sometimes. Where did that person go? Well, what are they doing there? And are they coming back? For example, my niece was 4 when my brother-in-law, Peter, died. And I got to sit with her during that time because I was primarily taking care of her as my sister was in the hospital with my brother-in-law. And she asked the toughest questions. She had an idea about what we were talking about, but couldn't find answers that made her comfortable. That's because there aren't answers that make us comfortable. And generally what we do as adults is we tell them the thing to shield them from the thing so that they don't have to deal with the thing. But by doing that, we pass on our fear of death. We pass on our denial of death to children. She knew something big was happening. We were acting strange and we were crying in those hushed tones, and her father was sick, and everybody knew. And by denying what was happening, what would have happened is we would have also had her not give her an opportunity to discuss it, to be with it. She would shove it down, and when illness happened in the future, or when a death or dying was happening in the future, she would be resistant to it. But by opening the space so that she could talk about what she was experiencing, her fear, her concern, where is he going to? Is he going to the place that he came from, is the question that she asked. I don't know, I didn't have the answer. But to be able to tell her that I didn't know, but also that we all hoped that he was happy where he went, and he was safe, and he was still gonna be loved, that was the best that we could do. And by continuing to do that with our kids, when they talk about death and dying, when they bring up the questions, it allows them to also be with the difficult things for themselves.
I'd love to hear you. Yeah. More, even if specifically this episode, how do you feel?
So social science and developmental science shifts, moves, but I think like you were saying, it's in the air. Your goldfish die. autumn comes, it's around, and kids notice, and you do them generally, there's a disservice if you shield them from these truths, and you lend all this sort of extra emotional baggage that doesn't need to be there. The exception would be, you kind of read your kid in real time. But also I think it's really important to remember that tears are not the problem. Sadness is not an enemy. So just because a kid may feel sad, that's quite all right, just like you're saying. So you kind of read the kid in real time, and you don't force them to stay in the room for the funeral, nor do you keep them out of the room of the funeral, would be the sort of latest thinking. Similarly with language, be careful when we say things like, going to a better place. Grandpa's going to a better place. Well, then or went to sleep. Well, then the kid's going to be terrified to go to sleep. Or the kid's going to be like, well, why the hell didn't Grandpa take me to this better place? Why did Grandpa left me here in this dump? So, so just be careful with language. You don't need to charge it. Don't need to uncharge it, if that's a word, too. Exceptions would be culturally. So if there's a cultural overlay, you're staying consistent with the language that's around the house. So that's prelude to the question you're asking about acceptance specifically. I can't imagine, I think I would bring just about any child into that room and then watch the child. If there's discomfort, might pause and talk it through. If a kid leaves the room, let them leave the room. That's okay. That's not a problem. They will auto-regulate if you let them, generally speaking. So I don't know. I can't think of, off the top of my head, of an age where I wouldn't, in some absolute way, show them this episode. What do you think?
I think I'd agree.
Okay, now we have some questions from the audience. So this is your chance to interact with the people here. So the first question we have from the audience is directed to Chris. Chris.
Get used to it. I'll be towards Chris.
The question is from Will. Can I arm wrestle you?
Please.
I want to see how big Will is first. Let's see.
If not, Ross will take it.
Okay, hand it over to Ross. That's right.
Actually, Ross versus Chris would be pretty interesting.
His arm is twice the size of my arm. Look at that thing.
Okay, here's another question for Mr. Hemsworth. And the question is, how has this experience changed your envisioning of your last breath, your last moment? Has this changed your experience of envisioning the instant you're no longer here?
Yeah. Dr. Peter Attia, the longevity expert that we had on the show in the first couple of episodes, asked me what a good death would be. And I said I would want to have a good life to warrant a good death. And I hope that in my final moments I'm proud of what I've been a part of, and hope I'm surrounded by people I love and respect and who love me. And I hope I've had some fun adventures along the way, and yeah, I'm full of joy at that moment. And if I have you guys there to guide me through it, I'm sure I would be. Again.
Okay, here's a question. Here's a question for Darren from a real film buff, Will again. Which was harder to film? A, the physical demands of Limitless, or B, the psychological demands of Black Swan?
Well, they're two different jobs. I think when you're making a movie, there's like a precision that happens where everyone's trying to tell and do something extremely specific moment to moment. So it's incredibly precise. It's kind of like working with a scalpel if you're a surgeon. And doing a documentary, you have to be completely open to what's happening because you never know what's going to happen. So you just have to be very prepared, incredibly well rehearsed, but allow the room for when Chris is doing the Arctic swim and he goes 15 degrees off to the left, that we can capture that and make that part of the story if we want it to be part of the story. So it's just two totally different jobs.
Okay, here's a question for Chris and Darren from Natasha. Question: I lost my father to cancer when I was 19 years old, and accepting that loss one of life's greatest, hardest challenges for me. Chris, Darren, do you have any reflections on losing loved ones and how we might better appreciate those around us while we are still here?
She kind of answered her question. I think that's right. I mean, I'm actually in the grieving process right now, and I try to find space and time every day to reflect, because it's very easy for every day to go by and to forget and just to move on. But I kind of make a conscious effort to spend a moment every day thinking, or at least doing a ritual that forces me to stop everything I'm doing. And sometimes in that ritual, I'm able actually to channel an image or a vision or a memory, and other times I'm not, but as long as I do the ritual, I feel good about it. So that's the way I've been sort of working through the grief. And definitely, when we worked on this episode of Acceptance, one of the weakest parts of it, not because of the person, but how it worked, was sort of the grief section with the gentleman who was the chief in Fiji. But I actually think it's one of the most powerful parts, because it's a super strong, hard idea to grasp that I can't say I fully grasp by picture lock, but it's becoming more and more comprehensible to me as time goes by.
Okay, here's a question for BJ from Caroline. She says, do you believe that palliative preventive medicine should be offered to middle-aged adults in regard to goals of care in the transition of aging?
Good question. Who asked that?
Caroline.
Good question, Caroline. Oh, oh, hi. Hey. Yeah, I would love, I mean, I take that question to mean sort of, can we normalize this stuff? Why do we even, palliative care is sort of a philosophy, mitigating suffering, maximizing joy, realizing oneself. These are not inherently medical stations or issues. In fact, palliative care as a field is really kind of trying to is really sort of a corrective in the medical healthcare system, a way of bringing humans into the mix. So I love that question. So yeah, I love that idea that you would use this sort of framework as you move through any big transition in life, whether it's moving from well to sick or something like that, through age. I think that would be a beautiful sort of way to superimpose this structure and get you kind of clear, because it requires you look at your reality the way it is as best you can, see the truth of your situation, look around you, see what you have to work with whom you have to work, and then go about doing it. And so it's really very practical, and it's, so I'm rambling a little bit, but yes, I think that's a beautiful idea. And I actually, it kind of reminds me, so my work now, I left the university setting and started my own online little counseling business and pulled palliative care out of healthcare, pulled it out of the medical framework. And we have people who call us now who are going through existential crises, a job change, or they don't like who they are anymore and want to become someone else. So I'm sort of seeing the power of your question play out, and I love it, because I really want to make the point that the world of the sick and the world of the well is the same world. That we're all, it's not the independent people over there and the dependent people over there. That's the way we structure it and language it. And sometimes you have the feeling you have to leave one world and go to another once you get sick or something like that, or once you get old. That's very problematic. So, yeah, anything that can bind, that can help us look at our reality and see it in its totality. Yeah, amen. I think that's a beautiful idea.
Okay. Well, here's a question that's a real showstopper. It's a question for Chris and Alua. And the question is, get this, what is your idea of what happens after death? From David. Ooh, this is a big one.
I wanted to ask you that because you've had far more experience with it than I have.
Well, interestingly, I don't have any experience with it at all because I'm still here.
But I mean,
still very alive.
You've been closer to it, right?
I've been closer to it.
I wanted to ask you when we were shooting and say, have you ever had interaction where you felt there was something occurring on the other side, or
Sure. Lots of things go on when people are dying that it's hard to contextualize or explain for those of us that are still firmly on this side, well, at least firmly for now, as far as I can tell. But, sometimes people talk to folks that aren't there or people that I can't see. And I'm really happy I can't see them because that would be a strange experience for me. So there are a number of things that occur. Animals pay attention to particular parts of the room or get real close to an object or something, pay a lot of attention in one space. There's a lot of things that indicate that there is something else that's going on as people are dying. Now, what happens once they die, I'm about to find out one of these days really soon, like everybody else. I have, some working theories, but my work generally asks me to be really secular in nature so that I can just be an unstreaked mirror to reflect back what I'm hearing in the people that are in their own experience so I can help them get clear on what their beliefs are about what happens after we die. But I got some theories. Okay, fine. Fine, okay.
You're not getting off with that.
Okay, this is my one big working theory for now. Okay, bear with me, it's a little colorful. So, maybe, just maybe, that as we're dying, we start to be able to feel into every single emotion that we've had while we've been living. And we bring and we recall all of the joy and the pain and the beauty and how it feels like when you first bite into a little slice of a tangerine or something and all the juice bursts into your mouth. You know that? It's a little tart, it's a little sweet. You feel all those things all over again. And as you are getting absolutely saturated with the experience of emotion, everything that this body has allowed you to engage with while you've been living, you cannot take another moment, you burst, and that's the moment of death. And you burst into this beautiful, big confetti glitter in bright colors that goes everywhere, sprays everybody. And then the experience of you that you've had while you're living, since it is no more, gets to watch as all the glitter, all the experiences that you've had, turquoise and pink and purple and silver, just spray out all over everybody and everything. And they settle slowly back down onto earth and join into what all that ever was, all that ever will be, and we get to ride that glitter wave for all of eternity.
I have exactly the same theory.
It's like that is the most secular answer I've ever heard. Confettiism. We've started a new religion here tonight at the 92nd Street Y.
Okay, well, here's another question for Chris. Chris, if you could do this whole experience all over again, what would you do differently? From Andrea in Philadelphia.
Hello. What would I do differently? I love the experience. I'd like to do it all again in a different setting and do some different challenges and different experiences. What would I do different?
Maybe not jump off that rope for 3 meters?
Yeah, maybe not do that. And I busted my ankle. That's right. During the training for the rope climb, I was training on a 9-foot rope, and I was climbing up, jumping down, climbing up, jumping down, and I jumped down and blew my ankle out. So I prevent myself from doing that. I wouldn't have ruptured my ankle. But no, I really did love the experience.
Okay, question for Ross now. What would a world look like where we lived longer, what would the world look like if we could live much longer? It'd be overcrowded, too many people to bump into? Or what would it look like to live if we all lived longer?
I'm still digesting the confetti theory, to be honest. I'm still. Okay, good one. I think we were talking earlier about Mars, colonization, things like that. Perhaps, we'd have more time to live out life's projects and things. Maybe we'd advance our understanding in certain fields. But maybe it's a good thing that we don't, that we clear out, confetti, and then hand over to the new generation. So, I don't know necessarily if it would maybe improve things. Maybe it's good that there's just this recycling and just making way for the new generation. So, I don't know. Thank you, though.
Okay, well, we're sort of running out of time, so let me ask one question for all of you. And I want to know your take on this last question, and that is the takeaway. If you were to watch this series from start to finish, what would you take away with it? What do you say, I learned something? It changed the way I view things. I have a new perspective on life. Is there a takeaway that you guys got working in the series or your friends watching the series? What takeaways do they get? Anybody?
Look, we're trying to make science cool. So I hope people go, oh, science is cool.
Okay.
I hope people realize that they have endless potential, and it is about getting out there and experiencing different challenges and putting yourself outside your comfort zone. As Ross always said, being comfortable, being uncomfortable. And that makes sense? That was being comfortable with the uncomfortable. And that's where so many lessons occur. And I found I learned so much through doing things that were unique and different to experiences I'd had before. So I hope it encourages people to get out there and experience life in its fullest.
What was that? What was it? What's Ross's line? Smile on the face?
Smile in the face of adversity.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it. Ross Edgley. That's my T-shirt from it.
Yeah, I think further to that, what I took as a friend, as a coach, as a spectator and a fan, just watching Chris repeatedly just take on these challenges. I was kind of trying to make sense of it, especially after the ice swim, that it wasn't necessarily happiness that you felt afterwards. And in my research, I was looking at a lot of the work of Aristotle. Aristotle, he kind of believed that happiness was kind of a bad word because it didn't sort of suggest that you should suffer or struggle. You should just be happy. Best example is if I gave you £1 million, you'd be happy. Of course, it's £1 million. But if you earned £1 million from a book you'd written, from a business that you'd built, that's eudaimonia. So he coined this phrase, eudaimonia, which was just happiness with fulfillment. And I think throughout the whole series, what was amazing is just the amount of hours that Chris put into training. So with the rope climb and then the ice swim, what you saw at the end, it wasn't happiness, it was eudaimonia. And I think anybody watching, it would just be so good if you find that as well in whatever event you kind of put your heart into. So that was something that I took away. Eudaimonia, not happiness.
I really hope that people watch the entire series and take away that a man like Chris Hemsworth, who plays an actual god and looks like one, like an actual god, is also very, very human. That he still experiences challenge and adversity and joy and humor, and that they also take away how he approached it all, because if it's possible for him, it's also possible for all of us.
Well, you said the big one, I think, for me, which is death is part of life. And that these things that we usually hold out as opposites are really actually deeply entwined and related. And that's just the vagaries of language. And my favorite one probably these days is this relationship between strength and vulnerability that Chris demonstrates so beautifully. Like I love that. I just love that. So that's probably my takeaway. But related to that, offshoot is about the vagaries of languages. Be careful of your stories. Hold stories lightly. Play with them. change them, rewrite them. Don't confuse your stories with the truth. That's probably my final. Thank you.
And let me tell you my takeaway. I do a lot of television where I get to interview other scientists. And whenever I interview these other scientists, I ask them the key question, the most important question of all. I ask them, is there intelligent life on the Earth? Well, I was watching the Kardashians on TV the other night, and I'm convinced there's no intelligent life in that sector of the Earth. However, in this room, I think we've shown by the quality of the questions and the reaction, in this room, we have some of the most intelligent beings on this planet. So congratulations, and I'd like to thank all you guests here for participating in this forum. I think you've made it a great success, and I'd like to thank all of you, and of course, the National Geographic and the Disney Plus for distributing the film with Chris here. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.